Bungie devs are fed up and speaking out as Marathon unravels by YongYea.
So once you get to a point where a development studio's developers are kind of losing faith in a project you're making and are speaking out because of how badly things are run, that's when you know you're in serious trouble. Marathon
Objective fact.
was already facing an uphill battle with the player count for the closed alpha showing a declining trend, highlighting how it's struggling
Bro, I hadn't seen those numbers.
to retain players over the long term. The critical reception surrounding what folks have played of Marathon thus far has not been very positive. It's not like this awful game, but it's not something that's inspiring a whole lot of confidence. A lot of people don't feel like this will be a live service that will really take the world by a storm, especially priced at $40 and tackling a genre, the extraction shooter genre, where it's not doing anything to really stand out from the established norms. Controversies like this one right here, where it's very clear that Marathon overtly stole assets from an artist, and a lot of their visual language seems to be kind of inspired by this artist's specific brand of graphic realism. That's kind of creating a shitstorm that has paved the road to a game that was already kind of not well received, but is no longer being really supported because a lot of people feel this is just such an egregious thing for them to do.
Yeah, I mean, and this isn't, we've talked about this many times, and other people talked about this many times as well. This is not the first time Bungie has done something like this, right? This is not the first time that Bungie has got caught, whether it's by a third-party artist, whether it has been caught using other people's content, right? So when it's the first time, okay, people just whatever, it's don't do it again. Second time, oh, shame on you, you need to do better. And now it's like the fourth time, and we're sitting here like, bro, we're not stupid, okay? Like, don't get me wrong. There's some people I wonder if they eat paint thinner, okay? I really have to question that. Don't get me wrong, right? But like, when this happens multiple times, that ceases to be, even if it is a core fundamental failing of the processes at play, that ceases to be a process thing and becomes all right, this is an institution thing. This is a Bungie thing. They have a refusal to adapt, learn, and overcome at this point, right? I think that is a reasonable conclusion at that point, and why so many people are fed up at this point.
Developers have tried to address the controversy, saying that it was the fault of one former employee, one former Bungie artist who stole assets, but a lot of people are finding difficulty in believing that this could slip by all of the other artists who are still working on Marathon, who are still at Bungie, especially when there are employees at Bungie who follow the artist whose work was stolen.
That's very damning.
They have tried to address the controversy.
Dude! They've been through the ringer. So I have to ask, where's Sony in all of this? Sony did purchase Bungie, did they not? As far as I'm aware, in my own subjective personal opinion, I have to treat Sony with the same way that I treat Bungie, right? I have to treat Sony as, did Helldivers 2 rip off something, right? Because it's Sony and Sony owns Bungie, and therefore, this is clearly what Bungie is known for at this point. Has another Sony IP. Has that ripped off something else, right? Where's Sony in all of this? With the big F off Sony money, right? They do own Bungie, last I checked.
Streams like this one, where they did kind of a chat with the community, but you can see right here from the likes to dislikes ratio and just how people are commenting that the reception has just not been positive at all, and people are kind of losing a lot of faith in this project. And now we're getting to a point where developers are speaking out to a degree that highlights that the development process of Marathon has been incredibly rough, that feedback has gone unheard, and a lot of people are really not happy within Bungie, happy with the leadership at the studio.
Weird. It's almost, how I keep saying it's not necessarily the devs' faults, like maybe singular devs, but how I keep saying it's almost like it's a managerial issue? Just things in general. Like we keep saying, Bungie devs don't know how to code, and insert like COD devs don't know how to combat anti-cheat. You know how we keep coming back to devs not knowing how to do stuff? And it's almost like I keep saying, no. The devs do what management tells them to. Singular devs, sure, can be problematic. But the management is who divvies out the work, who doles out. This is your project. This is your project. This is your project. Sir, what about this bug here? That causes the skybox to turn weird colors. I don't think you understand, Jensen. Your job is cash shop today. Okay, give me those cat ears. We need that cat ear. Okay, the kids are gonna love it, right? That's how the interaction happens, and it's almost like holding leadership accountable is how things like this can and do change. Not me saying it. YongYea literally saying that devs are kind of combating management at this point, where clearly management is an issue here. I think, yes, if we objectively look at it, things need to be done on a case-by-case basis. However, I will say we need to make sure that we're not throwing out spurious, it's just the dev's fault, or it's just, the people coding this is fault, when their hands could very well be tied.
And so that's when you've lost everyone, including your own developers, that's when you know a project is in serious trouble. I don't think Marathon really has much of a chance of success from where I'm sitting currently, unless they pull some kind of overhaul of things. So we talked about this Forbes article already from Paul Tassi. He spoke to employees, former and current, at Bungie, who spoke about how morale within Bungie is in free fall. The vibes have never been worse. Developers are saying their concerns about what happens to Bungie when Marathon bombs. So much of Bungie's destiny, and no pun intended, is riding on Marathon's success. And so Marathon's failure, Marathon bombing is just something that Bungie cannot afford, but that's the direction where this is headed. Currently, there are seemingly no plans of a delay for the game currently, even though a lot of people are suggesting that given the lack of content here and given just how feature incomplete the game feels for its $40 price point for a live service that's going to be rife with microtransactions, many are feeling like this game needs to be delayed, but there seems to be some stubbornness on that front. Combined with the fact that developers have been telling leadership what would and wouldn't work with this game, as far back as 5 years ago, but many of those developers have said that the feedback has gone unheard, and so that leads us to a situation where, the developers who knew what they were doing not being heard has led to a game that ultimately doesn't appeal to Bungie fans, it doesn't appeal to extraction shooter fans, it doesn't seem like it's appealing to anyone really.
So that's the thing I think that fascinates me, and this is why I've talked about, right? Like as treading on eggshells as Star Wars is for a lot of people, why I like hearing stories, and we've talked about this in a few reactions, right? We've talked where you have George Lucas talking to staff, right? And Mark Hamill says something, and they're just like, yeah, we'll omit that line, or how they talk to Lucas, and then things get changed because of that, and then you have things like, episode 4, 5, 6, technically Star Wars when it was launched, right? That were very, I would argue, widely critically acclaimed. You have the prequels, which were very divisive, but I mean, they've aged very well over time. I've personally always loved them, not to be hipster about it, but it's something I don't think we really see nowadays, because clearly we have devs here like, guys, this isn't gonna work. But then what happens, right? Like, management just goes, they stamp that veto on it and go, no, Jensen, you're working on cash shop and PvP only, right? Your name is Jensen, I'm sorry. Like, you see where that becomes like a thing? Like how when you don't have that feedback and you kind of just put the horse blinders on, how the product just it loses that deeper feel, that touch, right? I think that there's conclusions we can draw and wisdom we can draw from material like Star Wars, right? Where Lucas is receptive to changes and feedback, or any other movie that's receptive to changes and feedback, right? Or games that maybe started as one thing but became a completely different thing by the end, and it ended up being because of feedback and devs saying, actually, I think that this would work better. I think that this would work, right? I think that having that feedback and that acknowledgement also builds a good community as well, right? Where Resident Evil 4 versus Resident Evil 4 Remake, right? Remember how the remake was missing some things, some really campy things, right? After the Ashley segment in the original, remember how we had the lava pit, like the lava, you went over like the double wheeled minecart thing, and then you went into the room with the lava dragons. It had like lava floor, and there were dragons on chains that breathe fire. That was absent in the remake, right? And then in the original, you had baby jail, right? You had the baby cage with U3 fighting, chasing you throughout 3 of those. And then in the remake, we didn't even get U3 until separate ways, right? But I think that reasonably that leads into a better product. I think that leads into Resident Evil 4 Remake feeling a lot more grounded, if still not very campy. We did have things like in Village in Resident Evil 4 original. If you go across the house from where the shotgun is, you jump down where you go up the stairs, grab the shotgun, immediately turn 180, jump out the window where the ladder is, go into the house directly across from, like directly in front of you, take a left, go into the steel door, and then you're in a room, right? You can hunker down inside that room. Some people, I guess, also went into the tower as well, but they threw Molotovs at you in the original. And if you wanted to avoid the chainsaw guy entirely, you would just enter the village and then just go immediately left, right? Where you enter from Mendez's estate, right? You go from Mendez's estate back to the village, and there's that little shack on the left once you get back into the village. Or you could just hide there. All 3 of those places do not work in the remake because there's now a window in the first room. The tower, the floor now collapses under you, and the little shack from where the door to Mendez's estate is there's now a window there, right? And they can flank you now. So to me, what that doesn't read as disingenuous to the source material, but in fact supports the point of when you have feedback and you acknowledge feedback and criticism, you can make a product that is transformative and I would argue can augment and make the experience better. Long way to explain it. I am so sorry, but I felt it was relevant to explain.
And now let's talk about what this developer said just straight up on social media, though they did recently delete these posts, likely potentially because of, I don't know, NDAs and potential legal litigation. I'm not entirely sure, but they were very blunt about what they said. And what they said was archived by numerous games media outlets like the Game Post here. The developer was just really incredibly blunt about the state of the studio and how there's an environment there where it just doesn't pave the road for developers doing their best work and for a vision really coming together in a cohesive way that prioritizes just a really fun product over just, corporate practices. Mm-hmm. So right here, we got a former Marathon developer who spoke out saying that as a former Bungie employee who worked on Marathon, posts that were recently deleted, feel for those still at the studio. Working with engineers, feel for those still at the studio.
That was a pretty hard cut, but I have those moments. I have moments where it feels like I'm just speaking, but my speaking just completely goes out the window. I've had to hard cut like that so many times.
With engineering, Marathon leadership was extremely toxic and humiliating. I won't speak about the rest, but Bungie leadership needs to be gutted completely. And this is not the first time that we've heard about just awful.
What's the adage? People leave managers, people don't leave jobs.
Full leadership that not only paves the road for creativity kind of being hampered and it being limited, but also a situation where developers just don't feel happy working at the studio. It happened throughout the lifespan of Destiny. Tons of developers have spoken out throughout that game's development. But beyond that, Bungie leadership doesn't seem to have changed their ways with the development of Marathon, as we're seeing a lot of similar reports to what a lot of developers experience with Destiny. There was a round of layoffs back in late 2024, and speaking out against that, he said, "The leadership is the worst I've worked with at Bungie. Rampant micromanagement, frequent toxicity and violations of their core values, and no ability to execute on their multi-franchise vision."
So, I mean, at a certain point, right, as somebody who I feel I could be good in a management spot. I mean, I definitely have a test from the financial institution I worked at where I was like, 95, 97 out of 100 for management. I effectively aced the test for management. Look, at a certain point, you have to let the people under you do their job, right? You have to let them work. Now, if someone's going massively off script, if somebody's like, F it, I'm just going to do my own thing, right? Okay, let's have a chat. What's going on? Let's talk. What are your grievances? What can we do, right? How can we fix this, right? Especially if it doesn't align with, say, core values, right? Say, like, accountability being a core value, right? But then this person constantly just deflects, right? That I feel that would be an issue. But like, if you're constantly hovering over somebody, if you're constantly like soccer mom status, just hovering, and you're not letting them actually do the work, or even letting them fail in certain aspects, right? Like, man, I can't get this animation to work, and it's like, well, have you considered doing this? Oh, thank you, right? And then thus they're like, okay, now I won't do that again because I learned from that. Like, I feel this just breeds a very anxious workplace. I feel that this would breed a very negative workplace, a workplace that is scared of failure. And I don't mean failure in the grand sense, right? But like, we all learn from failures, do we not? Sometimes we have a bad upload. Sometimes we have a hot take. Sometimes, we make a purchase we probably shouldn't have, and then we're short for a couple bills, right? Small failures in life, right? Sometimes we forget to eat, and then we're just like, oh yeah, I forgot I didn't eat breakfast, right? Like, be allowed to have those small failures and to build. I would argue, as a manager, your whole thing is to, yes, we need to delegate out this work. We need to make sure that we're getting the project done. But you should also be building a good team. You should also be helping people achieve their goals. Because here's the thing, hot take, people don't want to work in some jobs for an excessive number of years. Maybe they're at Bungie because, well, paying my way through college, for game design, but then I want to head my own studio as an indie dev, right? Or, well, I'm going to do this, but honestly, I'm looking at going to cybersecurity after this, right? And like, sure, you want to retain good people, but sometimes people just find a better offer somewhere. Maybe someone's like, look, I'm at Bungie till I can score a sweet thing at Larian Studios, right? Like, things like that. But you still want to be sure that you're building people up. You want to be sure that you're investing in people. And you want to make sure to have that progressive environment rather than, being Professor Umbridge status, just making notes on a board, right? It just makes everyone uncomfortable.
Every day was a fight for autonomy and trust. Every day was someone telling me I'm not allowed to speak on any issue or problem in a professional tone. It was on our mind since the last layoffs in October of 2023. We asked Pete, and his response was that it was a lever he'd pull again. They need to flush out leadership completely. My team was excellent, but it felt like everything else prevented us from doing anything meaningful. You look at recent successes like Clear Obscure Expedition 33, and the commonality behind what kind of tied that whole team together was a certain level of kind of creative autonomy combined with leadership that had a strong vision, but also let developers cook and fostered an environment where it didn't feel like their creativity was stifled. It was just like a small development team that was agile, that had a lot of talent, and we're in an environment where that talent was allowed to shine.
Right.
But when you got leadership who let their egos get in the way, who think on a corporate level rather than on a creative level, who care more about the monetization rather than the art, and when you've got leadership who don't value the talent that make these projects possible, leadership might steer the ship, but you need a whole crew to run that ship. And when you don't value that crew and underestimate them and make them feel like crap and don't foster an environment where they're happy and content with the leadership and they feel confident in the leadership, you get just a messy development cycle, and you get a loss in faith, and you eventually get a situation like this where they start to speak out about the experiences that they've had, which further highlight a studio that feels like it's in free fall because their methodologies and their antics that they don't seem to be adapting in any way, shape, or form, that they don't seem to be adjusting in any way, shape, or form, or learning from, all that's going to catch up to them, and it feels like it's Bungie's reckoning now with all of that catching up to them now. And
I do think that in order to be, I agree with everything he just said. I think that he based YongYea. I think that there is a place for the corporate mindset, but it should not be everything, right? The corporate mindset of, sure, line go up, right? Line go up to a degree, let's be real, right? Line go up infinitely is not sustainable, but being able to be like, look, we need to push these specific things, we need to hit these sales targets, we need to do this for marketing, etc., right? Like, there is a place for the corporate mindset. But you also need to make sure that your ground level devs and their management have ability to say, yo, players aren't going to like this, or this is not working the way that you did. And that's, as far as I'm aware, what the concept of human resources was. But then again, I have no idea what human resources does anymore. Like, I don't know why the position even exists anymore, because clearly it's not doing what it's supposed to.
during that time when the layoffs happened and when this developer spoke out, he pointed out the repeated layoffs have only pushed the studio to rely more on contractors and even AI. Here's the exact quote from that developer. So when I hear that they laid off,
it depends what AI we're talking about, okay? Generative AI, that's the buzz. That's the thing. AI is a buzzword. Generative AI is what many of us are against, right? Even on YouTube, right? Like, look, if I'm going to be served an AI slot video, that better be tagged AI, or the uploader should be forced to either take it down, modify it, remove it, etc., right? Like, I think that needs to be fair because it lets the viewer be the most informed on the subject. Now, when we talk about AI for coding, when we talk about AI to, say, generate tiles, like what Warframe has tile sets, Diablo has tile sets that are arranged in certain patterns, right? I'm certain that AI tools can do that. We look back at Elder Scrolls Oblivion, right? And how many of the dungeons and how many the overworld, right? Was that not done by AI? And then you go through and you'll have, it's the hammer approach to making the world. And then you have, the person aspect of it that goes through, like the chisel and goes, well, that tree shouldn't be there because that's just floating, right? Those kinds of things, right? It depends what we're talking about with AI, because when you talk about AI, you're having like 6 conversations in a trench coat. Generative AI is the big one that people have contention with.
Another round of my talented colleagues and friends, I feel angry. They're not at fault. They're not the ones who need to be canned, and every round only strengthens their reliance on contractors and AI. What makes a great development studio is the nurturing of talent. When you've got the same people who kind of come together as a cohesive team over many, many, many years, and it's those same people there, and they kind of slowly foster in new people and then nurture those new people, and you create this kind of environment where you've got this really positive cycle of talent coming in, that's when you get top tier studios who are able to be agile and output consistent quality.
Was this not old Blizzard? Dude, until I played Diablo 2, the VODs had to be redacted because I kept hitting the Windows key and there was some personal identifying information on there. But I literally didn't play Diablo 2 until quite literally like early 2025, right? I didn't play. I knew people like talked about it. I knew people loved it. And then I played it and I went, oh my God, this is why people say they love old Blizzard. Now this makes sense. And then I go play something like Overwatch, or I go play, I don't even remember what the most recent thing I played was. But it's like, no, what he says tracks. And we look back to companies like Blizzard, old Blizzard, and you understand that tracks. That's how you build a good studio.
But when you've got a studio like Bungie where there's just constant turnaround, when developers are treated like crap, and when leadership just has no clue, no real creative vision or creative drive, and are more about just kind of letting their egos and their strive for monetization kind of hampering the potential of a project, you get a product like Marathon that in many ways feels soulless, and you get an environment where situations like plagiarism happening repeatedly at Bungie, it becomes commonplace, with Marathon in particular being the most egregious example yet. Now, I previously talked about Paul Tassi from Forbes and how he's spoken to developers about prospects surrounding Marathon. Well, he released alongside that article this video 2 days ago titled Marathon, There's No Coming Back From This Now, where he discussed some of the things that he's heard behind the scenes. And among those things was the requirements and the kind of criteria that Marathon needed to meet commercially in order for it to be considered a success or for it to make its money back. And what Paul Tassi heard was, quote, I heard this needed to be in the top 5 of NPD sales for the year if it's going to be success or considered a success. Crazy. No way. There is no way.
No, there's no way. If it has to be that much of a success, there is no way. I mean, dude, I was expecting Steam sale at minimum in the first 3 months.
And I concur with that assessment based on not only statistics surrounding how the closed alpha went and how quickly numbers dwindled when it comes to both the player base and also, social media presence like Twitch viewership, but also now when you consider the controversy surrounding it, when you consider just all the negative PR that the game is garnering because of accusations of plagiarism that are not just accusations, that's just fact at this point. And when you've got developers who are kind of expressing their disdain towards leadership and their lack of faith in this project and their fear that this will bomb, and just speaking out about how the direction of this game kind of went awry because developers who kind of tried to express their feedback were not listened to due to piss poor leadership, who were just too caught up in their own egos and just deemed themselves to be superior in terms of what they believe to be the direction of the project that would garner the most success. all of that has culminated in a situation where just about nobody believes that Marathon will be a success. If this dies off and all of that time and money and resources and manpower are spent on a project that's going to suffer the same fate as something like Concord, then Bungie is going to be in serious trouble, and the fate of the studio could be very much called into question.
So here's my hot take, not hot take necessarily. Here's kind of, I guess, my potential insight into it. And I would and I have to preface this with, I am not a financial advisor, especially when it comes to taxes and tax law. I can't give financial advice. Nothing I say should be treated as financial advice. I definitely recommend that you go speak to an actual tax professional. I say that, but it's the unfortunate reality is someone can still take what I say and then be like, oh, this Kip dude led me astray. Look, I've made the relevant disclosure at this point. Talking about taxes within the past year or so, because, pay taxes, right? I asked about, so what happens if, I become John YouTube, right? Just I'm able to hire employees, editors, artists, etc., right? To which I was advised, avoid employees, do more kind of contract work. So this is something I'd have to really sit down with someone who understands tax law, right? And like how taxes work. But that kind of makes me think, because we have seen, and chat does point out, contract jobs, you gotta love this practice of maintaining a constant rotation of temporary employees, seem to get more money out of it. But we also see in situations like Halo Infinite with the Slipspace engine, where the contract workers, literally by the time their tenure expired, just got familiar with the Slipspace engine, right? Leading to the issues that Infinite had. So this makes me wonder if the reason we have all contract is not necessarily having to pay them less potentially, but because there is a massive enough tax break that it's worthwhile enough to have projects dip in quality because you don't have a steady pool of employees, but rather contractors you can rotate in and out. And it's just favorable from a tax law standpoint. It just makes me think.
Somebody else who spoke to developers is Destin here, who published the following video on his YouTube channel titled Inside Bungie's Decline, Former Developers Speak Out. Again, so many developers are speaking out that it highlights just how much trouble this game is in. That level of lack of faith we've already seen from the community, but when it's even happening from within, then you're really headed towards an iceberg, essentially. So this is what Destin heard. This is what a former Bungie developer told Destin. Everything happening to Bungie is because of greed. Bungie's problems stem from a lack of player empathy, disconnected leadership, and a corporate-first culture. Internal language shifted from studio, games, and players to company, product, and customers during the Sony acquisition. And so, I don't know, there's some hints that the Sony acquisition only made that aspect worse. We have already seen that element kind of seep into Bungie even before the Sony acquisition. But yeah, I mean, Sony's big push has been to make as many live services as humanly possible within a few years. That's why they bought out Bungie. There's just such excess and short-sightedness with this live service pursuit. And some of that short-sightedness within Sony has seemingly bled into Bungie itself and the way they think about their products now, no longer trying to push boundaries, but just trying to chase whatever they think will result in great monetization schemes based on, market research. And then it doesn't help matters that Destin, speaking to developers, also heard that leadership within Bungie and the way just developers are treated and all that. Even Destin has heard from his sources that it is really not fun at all to work at the studio because of a culture that doesn't breed the greatest creativity, doesn't allow developers to really shine with their talent.
I mean, sure, you want to go to work and be like, yo, I'm here to work, right? I'm not necessarily here to be your friend. I'm not here to socialize, etc. But you shouldn't be in an environment that just feels like toxic. You shouldn't be in an environment that just feels soulless.
With developers telling Destin that it's essentially a cool kids club at Bungie when it comes to who's favored and who isn't. You either agreed with leadership or were put on a list, berated publicly, and told your ideas didn't matter. One ex-employee said if they didn't think of it, it wasn't worth doing. Again, this is just the height of ego, peak ego. What game development ultimately is a collaboration. When you've got as many moving parts as game development has, you have to, on some level, be open to the possibility that maybe you're wrong. Even if you have a strong vision, you have to consider that maybe developers have some good points to make because they're actually the ones making it. Leadership is ultimately about finding that fine balance between kind of setting the course towards a vision that you have, but also being able to steer around within that journey towards getting to that destination when your crew tells you, hey, I've seen something that maybe we should kind of look into and course correct around, because otherwise the ship might sink. You have to hire the right people and respect that those people know what they're doing and give them some kind of grace to allow their knowledge to kind of be able to dictate some things here and there as well. When you completely close off yourself to that, and then on top of that, berate your employees and treat them like shit and create an environment that, you know, a lot of people are calling a culture of toxicity and a culture where people feel humiliated, I mean, that's when you get a crew that just eventually stops caring and maybe even gets sick and tired of what they're actually making and stop believing in it. And so you just get worse results in turn.
I mean, this is how you get retired at work. This is how you get retired at work. This is how you get people that don't care. This is how you get people who do the bare minimum. Look, at the end of the day, like, whatever, because then we get into the weird quiet quitting debate, and it's like, bro, if my job description says X, I'm going to do X, okay? You can pay me more if I'm supposed to do Y and Z, especially if other person is not doing X, and now I have to do X squared, right? Can't deal with that. No, like, this is how you, he's absolutely correct. This is how you make an environment that is very closed off. It feeds on itself. It's the Ouroboros, snake eating its own tail, right? It becomes degenerative.
You get an environment where former employees will say stuff like this to reporters like Destin. It makes me sad to know there's so many talented people that can make great things but are still answering to management that can't stop shooting themselves in the foot. Yeah. They make bad decisions after bad decisions. It's not even surprising when a new story breaks. And then another developer said, I just want the devs to be okay. Same. Some more information that Destin unearthed based on the sources that he spoke to was that management has been obsessed with monetization above all else. And that's not surprising. We have seen how obsessed with monetization they've been based on just how heavily Destiny 2 was monetized. And so it's probably going to be no different for Marathon. I get that game.
So hear me out, though. Hear me out. Not even necessarily playing devil's advocate, but like YouTube work, right? Or Twitch work, right? Sometimes you don't want to do something if it's not going to pull in the numbers. Sometimes you don't want to do something if it's not going to, if you know, well, why would I cover this subject if it's just going to get demonetized, right? A lot of YouTube firearm channels are going through that, right? And it's one of those things you kind of sit there and go, okay, from a reasonable standpoint, wanting to monetize as much as you can, that way you have some return on the work that you're doing, I think is fair and justifiable. However, there is a point to which that becomes excessive. There's a point to which it becomes, I would argue, inappropriate. And I think that's what we're discussing right now. We are in a point where it is an inappropriate and a level of monetization, and with an unprofessional management work culture that is feeding into a negative downward spiral. That is what we're criticizing. At the end of the day, if someone does something and they want to do it for profit, sure, but there is a difference between profit and quarter over quarter, profit over profit, line go up infinitely. There is a difference there.
Games on some level have to monetize, especially when we're talking about live services that have to be maintained over the long term. But when that supersedes what should be the priority of a game, to be fun, that's why it's called a game. That's when you start to get deteriorating products that the community can very easily feel. I mean, you've got situations like this one right here where another former employee claimed there was a concern about Trials of Osiris PvP armor being too attractive with its glow effect. The worry was that it was too good and would impact Eververse sales.
That's bad.
The concern wasn't, are we giving players something that is good and cool enough? It was, we're giving players something too cool, and that coolness might affect sales across the board.
Hear me out, though, because Trials so this actually Trials feeds into other issues regarding cheating and regarding stacking. So there's a number of issues that go around with Trials, right? Especially with Bungie's inability to deal with cheaters, let's put it that way, to put it nicely. Like, does that not build retention, though? Hey, gamers, Bungie here. You this weekend could earn a limited time, very fashionable, very attractive glowy armor set for Trials of Osiris. But you got to make sure you do it this weekend, and then you'll see numbers spike that weekend, right? And then people will still argue FOMO, whatever, right? But it's like, I'm sorry, you get this really cool Trials armor for free, see a spike in players. Maybe you'll run it for an entire month, right? So weekend after weekend after weekend after weekend. Maybe you'll see, I don't know, retention go up, and then people being like, well, I hear that, Zowli's Bane might be a good thing for Crucible for Trials of Osiris. Maybe I should go grind some King's Fall. I'll try to get a Harrowed version of that so I can adept mod that, right? So you can give players an incentive, and you could also potentially so you're profiting off of retention and an influx of players at that point rather than direct monetization, right? I think that there is still a cost benefit analysis there. While you're not necessarily getting the immediate gratification, instant gratification of somebody's $1 or $20 or whatever, right? You do get that, like, oh, well, we saw an influx of players clearly, so we did something right, and just like, we want to, and then you write it off as not being able to do it all the time. Like, we want to make sure that, absolutely, we want to make sure people have a way to buy things that make them feel good, make them express themselves in game. Sometimes we feel like we want to offer the players something special, right? Like, can you remember what was it? Trying to remember, was it was Halo 3. The recon helmet, wasn't that originally by the old Bungie devs, right? Like you had to be a Bungie dev to have the recon helmet. There was something you had to do with a dev and you got something from it. I don't remember. It's been too many years. But like doing cool things like that is how you boost engagement. It's how you give back to your community, how you feed into that, right? I guess like Helldivers staff just play Helldivers and you can get to lobbies with them sometimes. Players find that cool. It feels like, the Steve Buscemi, how do you do, fellow kids, right? Make sure it can kind of come across like that a little bit sometimes. But like at least there's the attempt where other people, other companies, management don't even go that far. Don't even acknowledge their players.
So that kind of mentality of let's give players less because monetization is a priority is kind of the mentality that has infested the live service model and Bungie, who kind of took the live service model and made it about monetization. It's that kind of mentality that deteriorates the potential of a game because it's not about giving players the most potential fun with the highest potential of a product. It's about intentionally diminishing potential to kind of manipulate players to
that's it. He's 100%.
Sure that monetization is maximized, even if it means diminishing the creative potential and the design potential of a game. It's about intentionally making a game worse so that players have to pay to make it better. It's about schemes that ultimately is about how to extract the most money rather than how to extract the most kind of fun. They talk about engagement and about having to make money, but the money and the engagement follows if you make the most fun thing possible. And for some reason, that's an idea that is not sticking in the brains of executives and leadership. As paraphrased by the game post here, based on what Destin had to say, staff recalled being scolded about monetization in internal meetings and described an atmosphere where making money often seemed to take priority over player satisfaction.
But that's the thing, is like the thing that they're like if I went to Eververse right now, right, in Destiny 2, the things that they're trying to monetize don't really even sell to me. I bought the stupid wings, don't get me wrong. Where's my new wings, Bungie? Right? Where's my dragon wings, right? We can make this happen. I'm sure we could. But it's like, oh, have you considered getting this Star Wars skin? Not really, if I'm being completely honest. Well, have you considered getting the new ornament for the new weapon? No, I don't really care. I usually like the base weapon. Maybe I'll use the season pass version if I'm feeling a little spicy. I don't really care. Like what is your value proposition? What are you selling me? I will spend money, okay? DE once again last night gave me a 20% off platinum. I'm like, DE, please, my wallet. Here, take more money. DE's got me in a stranglehold right now. It's actually really funny. We as gamers will spend money on things. What is your value proposition? Why should I buy this? Why should I use anything else? I'm a warlock. Why should I use anything else than my Crota set with the Carminica shader? I have yet to find a paid Eververse set that is just better than that. And I like Crota. I like the red. I like the green on it, right? Especially how I have it shaded, right? But then that becomes the issue we're talking about. But you know what it did get me to do? It got me to play Crota. It got me to learn how the chalice mechanic work. It got me to learn lanterns. Half the community cannot run lanterns, even if they say they know what to do, right? It's almost like, oh, there was a cool thing, and it's one of the cool things that we can get for effectively free. Cool, let me learn the raid. Let me go grind up some weapons. Oh, I'm sorry, we're using Surrounded Bequest. Oh, I gotta go in DSC to get my Bequest weapons, right? Gotta make sure I get that enhanced Surrounded, try and proc that easier for Crota. You see how this feeds into each other, right? You see how that feeds into retention, even if you're not getting the monetary, like instant gratification?
They're happy to cut corners if it means making more money. They're happy to compromise your experience if it means making more money. That was the case for Destiny. You can bet your ass that that's going to be the case for Marathon. I mean, they'll even go as far as compromising morality and ethics, and they'll just steal other people's art to make their own lives easier. They'll profit off of somebody else's work, and they'll do this time and again and get caught time and again. And this is just something that continues to happen. And it's just unacceptable all around. The way they treat developers, the way they treat players, the way they treat artists. The amount of bad will surrounding Bungie right now is at an all-time high, I'd say. And, you know, it's had some pretty bad instances of bad will before, but it feels like all of that is just kind of culminating into a shitstorm of negative PR that will mark the doom of Marathon. When leadership continues to steer the ship the way they currently are, there's just no other way to really fight that unless someone else comes at the helm to steer the ship, unless leadership is changed, and unless the person at the top dictating everything kind of is someone who does really care about the actual integrity of not only game making and game development and the creativity surrounding that, but also just how to treat players and artists and all that. Unless we're at that level, there's just no fixing this. And leadership seems too stubborn and ego-driven to feel like they have the need to fix it and to feel like they have any kind of necessity to change. So with all that in mind, I just really have the worst feeling about Marathon. And at this level of developers speaking out, it would seem as though developers feel the same way, or at least a lot of them do. But, I guess only time will tell what the future holds for Marathon and whether all of this will kind of slap them awake and kind of allow them to come to terms with a reality that will force them to change course and to overhaul and to realize that if something doesn't give, this ship will sink. Or at the very least, that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the current state of Marathon and Bungie, and what you think about the developers speaking out and everything they've said. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated, on all things gaming news, reviews.
No, see, that wasn't a bad cut. That was actually a commentary on how we keep going in these patterns, these circles with Bungie. I think that was great.
And discussions. Stay tuned right here on YongYea. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.
I've heard that intro for the outro for a number of years. I love Yong's videos. I think that his videos have been great. I've watched him for a number of years. Sometimes I'll binge him. Sometimes I won't. Mostly it just depends what I have going on in my life and what I'm actually watching. But the thing I wanted to bring up, well, thank you, YongYea, for an excellent video on this. I did hear that I guess Bungie did want to implement subscriptions. I was actually, on hearing that, I'm like, wow, I'm surprised management didn't veto that to get a subscription model in the game. I'm very surprised they didn't actually, or still haven't. I think we're at a point. I don't think we're past the point. I don't know. I don't think we're quite past the point of no return. In some aspects, I think we are. If there is a gesture in good enough faith to deal with the problems and to try to win back players, I think that, especially when the alpha was so well received from a gameplay perspective, I think that there is salvaging this. I did watch Bife's video. I think that Bife taking a couple days, trying to let things sink in, I think that was the good call. And I ultimately agree with him for his entire video. I think asking Marathon to be shuttered its entirety is very disingenuous. I think asking for everyone to be fired is an incredibly childish take to have. Because at the end of the day, these are people's lives you're affecting. Now, when we're talking the actual art director who has followed the creator, the artist for a number of years on Twitter, and then it's found out that there were assets that were taken and plagiarized, that becomes an issue to me, to which I then pose the question in good faith. If I were to work in, say, a restaurant, a bank, etc., I was to work a quote-unquote, just entry job, right? A basic job, if you will, and I were caught stealing, taking, plagiarizing, would I have a job? And I think that's a question that ultimately I think a lot of people should be asking. Now, in regards to calling for someone's removal, once again, I mean, you are affecting people's livelihoods there. I will respectfully not dive into that. However, I think that's a fair question to pose. What if you did that? What if I did that? Is that necessarily, would that necessarily constitute disciplinary action up into firing? I think that's the question that people should be asking. And at the end of the day, I don't want Marathon to fail. At the end of the day, I mean, playing Destiny, I understand that there are decisions that the devs are limited on. They have a limited team, especially after massive layoff after layoff, and they are doing what they physically can. It's management at the end of the day that says, Jensen, you're working on the Cash Shop, you're working on the Star Wars collab. Even if Jensen wants to, say, bring Red War back into the game, or Jensen wants to do something else, right? I think that there's a conversation to be had there, and we need to be respectful about this. For me right now, I'm kind of avoiding Destiny because I need to see what happens with the Bungie audit. I need to see, that Bungie isn't going to continue plagiarizing stuff, because if they do, I pay my artists, okay? I'll go through Fiverr. I got my model done by my artist, Akino Arata. Absolutely love this model. And I can't imagine just yoinking their work or not crediting them, right? On my Twitch panel over on Twitch, I actually have it. On my reference sheet as well. I actually have it as well. It says their name. But that's just a Dingus's take on this. Consider this my response, quote unquote, comment for YongYea's video. And if you did enjoy this video, or if you found YongYea in any way, shape, or form interesting, especially if you haven't watched YongYea before, I've left his channel in the video in the description down below. Should be easy as possible for you to find it. Thank you everyone for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next one.